I met Claire on a spring evening that didn't feel like it was trying too hard to be anything special. No drama, no big romantic scene, just one of those unassuming moments you only realize was important in hindsight. It was at a mutual friend's wedding. She was there with a group of coworkers. I was there for the open bar and the buffet table, mostly. But there she was, wearing a green dress, barefoot halfway through the reception, and holding a glass of champagne like it was her natural accessory. We didn't talk much at the actual event. Just a quick laugh over something dumb the DJ said and a shared appreciation for the mashed potato bar. But something clicked. I don't know what it was. Maybe the way she looked straight at me when she spoke, or how she seemed to genuinely listen. A few days later, I got a message from her on Instagram. That mashed potato bar might have been the best thing I've had all year. I replied, "Want to beat it this weekend?" And that was it. Our first date was a tiny Thai place 2 blocks from her apartment, and we stayed until they started stacking chairs around us. Claire's the kind of person who doesn't rush through things. Conversations, meals, even picking which movie to watch, she takes her time. But she also doesn't overthink anything. She just lives in a way that feels balanced. I'm the opposite. I plan everything, structure it, optimize it. But with her, I never felt like I needed to. She made room for everything in life without making it feel chaotic. We dated for 3 years before we got married. Not because we were unsure, just because we liked the pace. We lived together after the first year, adopted a rescue dog named Baxter, and figured out all the daily rhythms that make a relationship real. Grocery lists, shared laundry loads, Sunday coffee walks, who gets control of the thermostat. We built something that felt easy, in the best way. We've now been married for 4 years. Claire works as an interior designer, freelance mostly, so she's often in and out of the house, juggling client meetings, samples, and blueprints. I work in digital marketing for a firm downtown, but since the pandemic, I've mostly been remote. It means we bump into each other often throughout the day, her grabbing her keys while I'm refilling coffee, or us eating lunch together more often than most couples probably do. It's become part of the rhythm. Our home is a 2-story Craftsman in a quiet Denver suburb. 3 bedrooms, small backyard, cozy kitchen. She's made it feel like a home magazine without losing the sense that people actually live here. We have a good group of friends, rotating dinner nights, game nights now and then. Family visits on holidays, the occasional long weekend trip to the mountains. Nothing flashy, just life. We've talked about kids, but never in a pressured way. Maybe next year. Maybe the year after. Right now, we're just enjoying what we've built. It's a good life. A full one. Claire and I had settled into a rhythm that felt right. Not perfect in a glossy, Instagrammable kind of way, but solid. Familiar. The kind of life where you know what kind of tea your partner wants when they're anxious, and which drawer they keep hiding the chocolate in. That's the kind of closeness we had. Quiet and complete. Our mornings were usually staggered. I was always up first, partly out of habit, partly because I liked having the house to myself for that quiet hour before everything started moving. I'd brew the coffee, black for me, with a splash of oat milk and cinnamon for Claire, and bring her a cup while she was still buried under the blankets. She always mumbled a thank you without opening her eyes, and I always smiled like it was the first time she'd ever said it. By 8:30, she'd be up and moving. She dressed with this effortless ease, even when she claimed to be running late. Hair pulled back, clipboard under one arm, fabric swatches stuffed in her tote bag. Claire never looked rushed, even when she was. It's something I admired about her, how she made everything seem under control. My workdays were predictable, mostly calls, emails, and client decks. I kept my office space tidy, nothing on the walls except a framed photo of Claire and Baxter at the lake last summer. Sometimes she'd pop in between meetings and sit on the couch across from my desk, scrolling on her phone or asking my opinion about a furniture layout for one of her clients. I always gave the most unqualified feedback possible, and she pretended to take it seriously. Lunchtime was our little check-in. We didn't plan it that way, it just happened. Most days she was home, and we'd make sandwiches or heat up leftovers, talking about whatever dumb headline we'd read or what the dog did that morning. We'd eat at the kitchen island, side by side, often in companionable silence. That kind of silence was rare for me with anyone else, but with Claire, it felt easy. Evenings were a mix of routine and comfort. Sometimes we'd cook together. She was better at it, but I had a few solid dishes under my belt. Other times it was takeout and TV. She liked crime dramas. I leaned more toward comedies, so we compromised on a lot of cooking shows and the occasional documentary about weird cults or ancient civilizations. Weekends were our recharge days. Farmers markets, hikes with the dog, sometimes just driving with no destination, windows down, music low. We didn't need constant excitement. We just liked being around each other. Claire had this habit of dancing while brushing her teeth. Every night. Just a little two-step sway, like she couldn't stand still. I'd watch her from bed, grinning like a fool, wondering how I'd gotten lucky enough to have this life. We weren't flashy. We didn't throw huge parties or take luxurious vacations. But we had inside jokes, shared playlists, a couch with our favorite indentations on each side. It all felt stable, like home was both a place and a person. There was no reason, none at all, to think anything could change. If I had to describe our life in one word, it would be settled, not in the boring, resigned sense, but in the kind of way that feels like solid ground under your feet. Claire and I had built something steady, predictable in all the best ways. I think there's a certain kind of magic in that kind of normal. We had our routines, sure, but there was also a sense of ease in the unpredictability. Like how she'd randomly decide to reorganize the kitchen cabinets every few months, never out of necessity, just because she liked changing things up. Or how we'd be driving somewhere ordinary, like to the grocery store, and she'd suddenly say, "Let's take the long way." And we would. We'd end up watching the sunset from a hilltop or finding a little roadside diner and splitting a slice of pie. There were traditions, too. Friday night pizza, always homemade. She handled the dough, I chopped the toppings, and we argued lightheartedly over whether pineapple belonged on pizza. She said yes, I said never. Sunday mornings were for pancakes and sleeping in, with Baxter curled up between us on the bed like he owned the place. On birthdays, we didn't do gifts, just letters. Real ones, written by hand, sealed in envelopes and read aloud. It was Claire's idea originally, but it became one of my favorite parts of being married to her. She had a warmth that made people feel welcome. Friends gravitated to her naturally. When we hosted dinners or small get-togethers, Claire was always in the center of it, laughing, pouring wine, setting out snacks. She knew how to make a home feel alive without ever making it feel staged. Her presence did that. I used to watch her sometimes during those gatherings, just quietly, thinking, this is the life I hoped for. We traveled when we could, weekend trips to nearby towns, a longer vacation once a year if we could swing it. Last fall, we spent a week in Santa Fe. Claire had always wanted to go for the art and architecture. I went for her, but ended up loving every minute. We wandered markets, ate green chili everything, and stayed in a tiny adobe rental with creaky floors and sun-warmed walls. It felt like pressing pause on the rest of the world. We hadn't started trying for kids, but the conversation had come up more often lately. She'd mention it casually, pointing out names she liked, asking what kind of dad I thought I'd be. I told her I didn't know, but I wanted to find out with her. We weren't in a rush. We just knew that one day it would feel right. At night, we'd lay in bed and talk about nothing, or everything. Sometimes I'd fall asleep mid-sentence, and she'd nudge me and say, "You were saying something sweet. Finish it." I never could remember what I'd been saying, but I always tried. Everything felt full, whole. We had the kind of love that didn't need to be dramatic to be real. No shouting matches, no huge declarations. Just 1,000 little affirmations day after day. I thought we were safe. I thought we were good. And in those days, before everything began to unravel, we really were. It started with something small. They always say that, don't they? A moment you could brush off if you tried hard enough. And I did try. I think we all do at first, when something doesn't quite line up, but you're too invested to look at it too closely. Claire came home late from a client dinner. That wasn't unusual on its own. Her work had always been unpredictable. She'd taken on a new project redesigning a hotel lobby downtown and said it came with more evening meetings than usual. Fine. But when she walked in that night, her cheeks were flushed, her hair messier than usual, and her smile too wide for someone who claimed the dinner had dragged. She smelled like wine and someone else's cologne. Not mine. Still, I said nothing. I took her coat. Asked how the meeting went. She gave me this breezy summary, too breezy. Full of filler, no real details. The kind of summary that sounded practiced. But she laughed, kissed my cheek, and asked what I wanted to watch that night like nothing had changed. And maybe it hadn't. Maybe I was tired. Overthinking. Making something out of nothing. But the next day, I noticed her phone had a new passcode. We'd never been one of those couples that shared everything, but we also didn't have anything to hide. At least, I thought we didn't. I mentioned it casually, something like, "Hey, did you change your code?" She smiled and said, "Yeah, I updated all my passwords." Security stuff. Got a weird email last week. Seemed reasonable. It always does in the moment. But once you start noticing one strange thing, you start noticing all of them. Like how she was suddenly working later. A lot later. Meetings on weekends. Phone calls in the other room. Always answered with a quiet tone and phrases like, "I'll call you back later." When I walked in, she'd tuck her phone under a pillow or flip it face down. She said she was just trying to disconnect from work, which sounded thoughtful. It also sounded false. She laughed less when we talked. She touched me less when we sat together. She still said all the right things, but the words felt lighter, as if they no longer had roots. One night, we were watching a movie and I made some dumb joke, something that would have made her giggle before, and she didn't even look up. Just kept scrolling through her phone, completely elsewhere. The worst part wasn't the distance. It was the fact that she didn't seem to notice it. I didn't say anything, not really. A few half-hearted questions. A couple of "Are you okay?" check-ins. Each time she answered with a shrug or a tired smile. Just work. Just tired. Just a lot on my mind. She always had something to say, but none of it said anything real. I started going to bed before her, which felt strange. We'd always gone at the same time. She started showering late at night instead of in the mornings. Stopped leaving her phone on the nightstand. Switched her ringtone to silent. I kept trying to tell myself I was being paranoid, that it was just a rough patch, that nothing was wrong. But something was wrong. I just didn't know what yet. It's strange how quickly your home can start to feel unfamiliar. You live in it every day. You know the shape of every creak in the floorboards, the hum of the fridge at night, the way the light hits the walls in the morning. And yet, one day, it all feels different. Not louder or quieter, just off. Like someone moved everything 2 inches to the left while you weren't looking. Claire had started humming to herself again, which wouldn't have meant anything if she'd always done it. But it was new, almost like nervous energy. She'd walk into the kitchen, open the fridge, forget what she wanted, then hum something tuneless as she stared inside. When I asked her what she was looking for, she'd snap out of it and say, "Oh, nothing," and close the door like I'd caught her doing something wrong. I didn't ask questions, not because I didn't have any, but because I wasn't ready for the answers. Maybe some part of me thought if I stayed quiet, everything would drift back to normal, that the distance would close on its own, that I'd wake up and realize it was just me imagining the shift. But the shift didn't stop. It widened. She started dressing differently when she left the house, just slightly more put together, like she was going somewhere more interesting than the office or client meetings. She'd put on perfume before heading out, the kind she usually only wore on date nights. I mentioned it one morning, trying to keep it light. "You're fancy for a Wednesday." She just smirked and said, "I like feeling good." Then she kissed my cheek and walked out the door. I stared at the closed door for a while that day. It wasn't just her behavior. It was the way the air felt around her. Like there was something unsaid hanging between us all the time. She looked at me differently. If she looked at all, there was less eye contact, less warmth. The kind of shift that's hard to articulate, but impossible not to feel. She was on her phone more too, always tilting it slightly away when I passed behind her. Once, I heard her laughing in the other room. Not just a chuckle, but a real, unguarded laugh. The kind she hadn't made around me in weeks. When I asked what was so funny, she just said, "Stupid meme," and didn't show me. That was new too. At night, I lay awake beside her, watching the ceiling, thinking about how someone could be so close and feel so far. I told myself I was imagining it, that every marriage has weird stretches, that work stress and routine can dull the edges of even the best relationships. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. There were moments, brief ones, when she looked like the Claire I married. A certain smile, a spontaneous hug, her head on my shoulder during a movie. But they came like flashes, too quick to hold on to. And then she'd pull away, distracted again, phone buzzing with messages she didn't want to talk about. I wasn't ready to believe anything was truly wrong, but it was getting harder and harder to believe nothing was. The thing that started to wear on me wasn't the silence, it was how comfortable she seemed in it. Like whatever space had opened between us wasn't bothering her. Like she didn't notice, or worse, noticed and preferred it. Claire had started going out more often, but with vagueness where there used to be detail. Meeting a client, she'd say, grabbing her purse. Last-minute consult. She'd smile, kiss my cheek, and walk out like it was nothing. And maybe it was. But it wasn't like her to leave out specifics. She'd always been a talker, someone who narrated her day in detail, down to which barista made her coffee and which chair she sat in during meetings. That had all stopped. Now it was just vague names. Sophie, Tasha, a few people from the project. Always plural, always casual. But she never offered more, and I stopped asking because I was afraid of sounding like I didn't trust her. Or maybe I was afraid of what I'd hear in her answers. One Saturday afternoon, I caught her standing in front of the mirror, adjusting her blouse in a way that didn't look like she was trying to be comfortable. It looked like she was trying to impress someone. She wore jeans that she hadn't worn in months, heels I hadn't seen in over a year. I told her she looked nice. She barely responded. She said she was going to an art show downtown. I offered to come, said it might be fun, spontaneous even. Her expression tightened for a second before she recovered and gave me a soft smile. It's just a client thing, she said. Super boring, honestly. I nodded and let it go. But I didn't believe her. Not fully. The next morning, I found a wristband from a rooftop bar on the kitchen counter. I asked about it, and she blinked like she didn't know what I meant. Oh, that? Oh yeah, they ended the night at a bar. Just for a bit. She didn't look at me when she said it. Just wiped the counter and moved on. Little things kept piling up. Receipts in her purse from places I'd never heard her mention. Missed calls from numbers saved without names. A new playlist she always played through her AirPods, but never out loud. I asked what she was listening to one evening. She paused and said, just random stuff. Lo-fi. She never listened to lo-fi. One night, I heard her laughing on the phone in the backyard. It was after midnight. I stepped outside, but she'd already hung up. She smiled like nothing happened, said she couldn't sleep and needed air. I sat next to her for 10 minutes. She didn't say a word. I began noticing that her schedule no longer seemed to fit inside ours. There were gaps I couldn't place. Days when she left before I woke up, claiming a client emergency. Nights when she came home hours after she said she would. She never smelled like herself anymore, sometimes too much perfume, other times like the kind of bar where drinks get spilled and no one notices. Still, I didn't confront her. I didn't dig. I kept telling myself there had to be a reason. Something I was missing. But something was shifting in me, too. The way I moved. The way I watched. My trust hadn't shattered, but it was definitely cracking. I'd always thought I was someone who believed in giving people space. But now it felt like I was giving her room to disappear. And maybe she already had. I didn't plan it. I'm not the kind of person who snoops, and I've never believed in tracking someone you love. But there's a difference between paranoia and instincts, and after weeks of watching Claire move through our home like a woman keeping secrets, I couldn't quiet that voice inside me anymore. It was the little things that finally got to me. The way she lingered by the door after client dinners. How she sometimes came back with makeup smudged and smelling of cologne that wasn't mine, claiming she just had a long day. She was careful, sure, but not careful enough. I'd sit in bed while she showered late at night, her phone always locked, her eyes avoiding mine. There was no warmth in her kiss anymore, only obligation. I knew something was happening. I just didn't know what. And not knowing was starting to eat away at me in a way I couldn't explain. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I bought 2 small cameras online. Ones that didn't need wires. Motion activated. Easy to hide. I wasn't proud of it. In fact, the day they arrived, I let the box sit unopened for hours. I walked past it in the hallway like it was radioactive. But that night, when Claire said she was going out for another last-minute consult, something in me broke. I opened the box. One camera went in the living room, tucked discreetly behind a row of books. The other went in our bedroom, hidden in a plant on top of the dresser. I told myself it was temporary. Just enough to get clarity. Just enough to stop feeling like I was going crazy. That first night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about what I was doing, how it felt like betrayal, even though I wasn't the one keeping secrets. But then I thought about all the times she'd come home late without a solid answer. All the half-smiles. All the names that kept changing. I needed to know. And I couldn't ask her. Not without sounding like a man who'd lost his grip. Not without handing her an excuse to deny everything and call me the paranoid one. The cameras were subtle. No lights. No sounds. They recorded short clips any time they picked up motion. I checked them once the next morning, nothing out of the ordinary. Claire made coffee, let the dog out, paced around the kitchen on the phone. Whoever she was talking to, she kept her voice low. I couldn't make out words. But her body language was different. She was smiling again. Laughing. She hadn't laughed like that with me in weeks. Over the next few days, I tried to act normal. I smiled, nodded, asked about her day. She answered like she always did, with just enough detail to keep me from digging, but never enough to satisfy. Every time she left the house, I waited. Every time she came home, I watched her movements more closely. Still no confrontation. Still no proof. But something was building. Quietly. Inevitably. I didn't know what I was about to discover. I didn't know when. But I could feel it. The truth was coming. And I was finally ready to see it. I don't know what I expected. When I set up those cameras, I think part of me still hoped I was wrong. That maybe I'd find something harmless, something awkward and explainable, and I'd have to sit down with Claire and apologize. Maybe I'd feel ashamed, and she'd look at me like I'd let my insecurities win. We'd have a long, difficult talk about trust and work-life balance, and then we'd move on, a little shaken but intact. But that's not what happened. It was a Wednesday. Claire had left in the late afternoon, saying she had a dinner meeting with a supplier who was flying in from out of town. She wore a black dress I hadn't seen in months, tight, elegant, confident. She did her makeup with extra care, hair curled just right. She even looked in the mirror and smiled at her reflection, turning slightly from side to side like she was checking for the perfect angle. I sat in the living room, pretending to scroll my phone while she moved around the house, telling me she wouldn't be home too late. I said, "Have fun." She said, "Don't wait up." By 10:30 p.m., the house was quiet again. Baxter was curled up at my feet. I hadn't touched dinner. I waited until the silence felt unbearable, then I opened the app on my phone that connected to the cameras. I don't know how to explain what it felt like to see the first few clips. Nothing at first, just an empty room, shifting light, the curtain moving slightly in the breeze. Then, movement. At 8:42 p.m., Claire re-entered the house. She wasn't alone. He followed behind her. I didn't know who he was. Tall, well-dressed. She was laughing, really laughing, head tilted back, her whole face open in a way I hadn't seen in months. They walked into our living room like they belonged there. Like this was normal. She took off her coat, leaned into him, whispered something. He pulled her in by the waist. They kissed. Long familiar. Like this wasn't new. I just sat there, watching. Then they went upstairs. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I tapped over to the bedroom camera. The timestamp read 8:47 p.m. The next few minutes played out in total silence. There they were, in our room, on our bed, touching, laughing, clothes disappearing. I watched it happen, not in one burst of horror, but in slow motion. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with, the one who still kissed me goodnight, was making love to someone else in the space we'd made our own. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the comfort, the confidence, the ease with which she moved around our bedroom, like this was something she had done before. Like I didn't exist. She wasn't nervous or conflicted. She was happy. That's what broke me. I don't remember pausing the video. I don't remember standing up. I only remember staring out the window for what felt like hours, my body buzzing with something between grief and disbelief. My chest was tight, my hands numb. I wanted to scream, but I didn't make a sound. She came home around midnight, just like she said. I was back in bed, pretending to be asleep. She climbed in beside me, her movements light, almost tender. I felt her hand graze my shoulder, a silent, "I'm here." I didn't move, didn't speak, but I knew. Everything had changed, and she had no idea I was already gone. The morning after I watched that footage, I sat at the kitchen table while Claire moved around the house like nothing had happened. She poured coffee, humming softly to herself, glancing at her phone between sips. She didn't even look at me. Not really. Maybe she sensed something was off, or maybe she just didn't care to check. Either way, I knew it was the last morning we'd ever share in that house. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask questions or accuse. That would have given her too much room to lie, to twist it. I'd already seen everything I needed to see. The man she brought home was real. The look on her face was real. Her betrayal wasn't a moment. It was a life she'd already started living without me. So I made a decision. Not just to leave her emotionally, but to make sure she felt the ending as much as I had. It wasn't hard to set up. I already had the footage. I already knew the truth. But there was one more piece I'd been sitting on for longer than I cared to admit. Claire's best friend, Lauren. We'd always had chemistry, one of those silent things that live just below the surface. Nothing had ever happened. Not once. But I saw the way she looked at me when Claire wasn't around. The way she listened when I spoke. The way she'd check in on me, even for things that didn't really need checking in on. So I called her. We met that afternoon. No pretense. I told her I knew. That it was real. that I'd seen it. And then I asked her a question I'd never imagined myself asking anyone, least of all her. I want to end this on my terms, I said. I want her to know exactly what it feels like. Lauren didn't flinch. She nodded slowly and said, I'm not proud of this, but she deserves it. Her voice was calm, steady. She'd known Claire for years, but apparently that loyalty had worn thin long before I realized. It happened that evening, in a hotel room 2 miles from our house. I didn't film it out of anger or lust. I filmed it because I wanted there to be no room for argument, no denial, no narrative she could spin. Just truth, cold, inarguable, and clear. Once the file was ready, I sent it to her. No message, just the video. And 10 minutes later, I sent her the footage from our bedroom, the one she didn't know I had. No caption, no warning. Just 2 files. Her betrayal, mine. Then I went home. She was there, pacing in the living room, phone clutched in her hand. Her face was drained of color. When she saw me, she started to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. Get out, I said, my voice flat. Now. She blinked, stunned. Wait, I can explain it. No, I said. You can't. You already explained everything. She started crying, pleading. Her voice cracked, her hands shook. But I didn't care. I walked upstairs, grabbed her things, whatever was easy to grab, and one by one, I tossed them out the front window. Clothes, shoes, her perfume, the throw blanket she loved. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything hard. Just calmly, methodically, emptied her from the house. She screamed my name, tried to pull her suitcase from my hands, tried to hold onto the doorknob when I finally forced her out. But I didn't let her back in. Not for a second. When it was over, I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by silence. And I felt peace. Not joy. Not relief. Just the sharp, clean break of a rope that had been cutting into me for too long. The house felt bigger after she left. It wasn't just the absence of her things, it was the air itself. It moved differently. There was no perfume lingering in the hallway, no half-finished tea mugs on the counter, no humming behind a closed bathroom door. For a while, I hated how quiet it was. It felt like loss, even though I had been the one to end it. But slowly, the silence started to feel like something else. Freedom. I took time off work. Not a dramatic sabbatical, just a few weeks to breathe. I slept in, took long walks with Baxter, rearranged the furniture in the living room. I started reading again. I bought groceries without rushing. I stood in the middle of the kitchen one afternoon and realized I'd spent an entire day without thinking about her. That's when I knew I was healing. Lauren and I didn't talk after that night. Whatever happened between us wasn't a beginning. It was a fire meant to end something. We both knew it. She moved on, and so did I. No texts, no weird tension. Just a shared silence, clean and understood. It wasn't long before I started seeing friends again. One of them, Jason, invited me out to a small art opening one Friday, nothing fancy, just local work and free wine. I almost didn't go, but something about the simplicity of it pulled me in. And that's where I met Anna. She wasn't flashy. No dramatic dress or practiced charm. Just a woman standing alone, looking at a black and white photo of a broken tree, sipping her drink like she actually tasted it. We struck up a conversation about the piece. She said, "It looks like something strong that forgot how to be." I don't know why that stuck with me, but it did. We talked for over an hour. About books, music, what makes a good Sunday. She told me she was a landscape architect, loved early mornings, hated small talk. She didn't ask about my past. I didn't offer it. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I didn't want what came next to be built on what came before. We met for coffee the next weekend. Then lunch. Then a walk with Baxter, who decided he liked her immediately. She didn't try to impress. She didn't ask for anything. She just listened, responded, showed up. And I noticed something. I wasn't watching for lies. I wasn't checking the time, or her phone, or the way she said goodbye. I wasn't waiting for betrayal. I was just present. That was new. It's early. I'm not rushing. I'm not dreaming of wedding rings or futures. I'm just letting it unfold. For once, I'm not trying to fix anything, or protect myself, or analyze every detail. I'm just here, alive. And that's enough. It's been 6 months since Claire walked out of our house for the last time. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night expecting to hear her brushing her teeth in the bathroom, or padding down the hallway on those old hardwood floors. Muscle memory is stubborn like that. The echoes of a life you lived don't vanish all at once. They just fade, piece by piece. Until one day you realize you can't remember the sound of her laugh or what it felt like to hold her hand without thinking about what she did. I used to think betrayal would leave a permanent mark, some wound that never quite healed. But it's not the betrayal that lingers. It's the doubt, the way it rewires you, makes you question everything that was once automatic. You don't just lose trust in them, you lose it in yourself. But then, over time, if you're lucky, something shifts. You realize you did survive. You did get through the sleepless nights and the sick feeling in your gut and the ache of knowing someone else touched what was yours. You realize you still laugh. You still breathe. You still matter. And eventually, you realize you're free. I'm not the same man I was a year ago. Not harder, but sharper. Not colder, but clearer. I understand myself better now. I know what I want, and just as importantly, what I won't tolerate ever again. That knowledge came at a cost, but I've stopped regretting the price. Anna is still in my life. We see each other a few times a week. It's easy, uncomplicated. She doesn't ask more than I'm ready to give, and I don't pretend to be further along than I am. Some nights we talk for hours, some nights we just sit on the porch and watch the sky darken. I don't know where it's going, and I'm okay with that. Claire hasn't reached out. Not once. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe pride. Or maybe because whatever life she has now, she believes it was worth what she threw away. That's her burden to carry, not mine. I deleted the videos months ago. Both of them. I didn't want that kind of poison sitting on a hard drive, lurking in my past like a trapdoor. What happened, happened. It's written in memory now, quiet and permanent, but no longer in control. I've started running again, reading more, calling my mom just to talk, laughing with coworkers, sleeping deeply, living simply. Some mornings, I look in the mirror and barely recognize the man staring back. Not because I've changed so much, but because for the first time, I see him. No shadows behind his eyes. No weight in his chest. Just someone who walked through hell and didn't burn. The truth is, this story was never about her. It was about me.